The Biggest Bear by Lynd Ward. Johnny Orchard lived on a farm farthest up the valley and closest to the woods. On the hill behind the barn, Johnny's grandfather had planted a few apple trees. These were the only apple trees in the valley. Whenever Johnny went down the road to the store for a piece of maple sugar or something, he always felt humiliated. The other barns in the valley usually had a bearskin nailed up to dry, but Johnny's barn never did. Every fall for 3 years, Mr. McLean had come in with a big bear. And one evening, Mr. Pennell had just stepped out to the edge of his nearest field and shot 3 in a row as they were heading for tall timber. It is true that Johnny's grandfather had met a bear once when he was on the way back from picking apples. But he had gone in one direction while the bear went in the other. When Johnny had asked him why, his grandfather said, "Better a bear in the orchard than an orchard in a bear." It was very humiliating. Johnny said, "If I ever see a bear, I'll shoot him so fast he won't know what hit him. And we'll have the biggest bear skin in the whole valley." Well, Johnny left for the woods. He'd gone quite a ways into the woods and came a place where there was a stump. Something seemed to be moving in the bushes behind it. It was a bear, all right. He seemed hungry, so Johnny gave him a big piece of maple sugar. On the way home, the bear ate all the maple sugar Johnny had in his pocket. Johnny's mother and father were a little surprised to see that Johnny had really a bear with him. Johnny's grandfather said, "I suppose you know what bears like to eat." The bear liked the milk that was meant for the calves. He liked the mash that was meant for the chickens. And he liked the apples in the orchard. He liked pancakes on Sunday morning. And most especially, he liked maple sugar that Johnny brought him home from the store. Well, there was hardly anything he didn't like. And Johnny's mother got pretty upset when he started looking for things on the kitchen shelves. In the fall, Mr. McCarroll got pretty upset when the bear spent a night in his cornfield. And in the winter, the bear had a wonderful time with the bacons and hams in Mr. Pennell's smokehouse. It was bad enough. He emptied all the sap buckets when the McLeans were tapping their maple trees in the spring. But it was worse later when he got in the clean shed and drank up most of the maple sugar. He was always eating, it seemed, and he grew pretty fast and pretty big. Finally, Mr. McLean started talking to Mr. Pennell. They both went to see Mr. Carroll. And then they all came to see Johnny and his father. What they had to say about Johnny's bear was plenty. He was a trial and a tribulation to the whole valley. After the men had left, Johnny's father explained to Johnny that the bear would have to go back into the woods. So the next morning, Johnny and the bear started out. They walked for miles due west on an old lumber road, way past Baldwin's Hill, to an old clearing that was overgrown with raspberries. And Johnny explained to the bear the time had come for him to go and live in the woods like other bears. He gave the bear a last hug and started the long walk home. While he was doing the chores the next morning, Johnny saw the bear hadn't stayed in the woods very long. So Johnny started out again, due east this time, to the blueberry buff, way past Watson's Hill. And when Johnny left him, the bear was eating blueberries very happily. But 2 days later, he was back again. This time Johnny took him due south and got a boat and rowed 2 miles out in the lake and left him on Gull's Island, which is a pretty big island. But the next morning, there he was, and not even wet. Johnny and his father had to talk it over. They decided there was only one thing to do. Johnny said he would do it. They really didn't have to go very far, but somehow Johnny just kept walking. They went north this time. There were no roads, and it was a part of the woods where Johnny had never been before. At last they stopped. Johnny seemed to have a hard time getting a bullet in the gun. While he was working with it, the bear seemed to get a whiff of something. Without warning, he took off through the woods. Johnny hung on for dear life. They went through the woods so fast, Johnny lost his gun, but he held on to that rope. They seemed to be heading for a sort of a little log house. They went through the doorway pretty fast, and something came down with a bang, and they were caught. When Johnny looked around, he saw the bear was happily chewing on a big lump of maple sugar that had been put in the trap for bait. Pretty soon some men came. They were a little surprised to see Johnny in there. They explained to Johnny that they were getting animals for the zoo in the city. They were delighted with Johnny's bear. He was much bigger than they had ever hoped for. He will have a fine place to live and all he wants to eat, the men told Johnny. And you can come and see him whenever you want. And I'll always bring him some maple sugar, said Johnny. And that's the end of The Biggest Bear.